Mark Ramsey, Congressional District 10. Having copies handed out of a resolution that I am proposing. It's based on something that the SREC did on Saturday. On Saturday, if you haven't heard, the SREC passed a resolution overwhelmingly to basically complain about the Supreme Court decision regarding the Texas case before them. And it had some other language that encouraged the other state legislators to try to fix the problem of the 4 states that were identified. I took this resolution from SREC and I modified it to incorporate unique aspects of the Electoral College. It is patterned after the one that passed already overwhelmingly and received very good response from people across the state. And I'll read it to you now. There are copies being passed out. It's entitled, "Defending the Integrity of Our Constitution, Our Elections, and These United States. Whereas the members of the Presidential Electoral College from Texas condemned the moral cowardice of the United States Supreme Court in failing to accept the original jurisdiction of a suit by one state against another, which is expressly allowed by the United States Constitution in Article 3, Section 2. And whereas the United States Supreme Court ruled that it would not hear the case because the state of Texas lacked standing, and whereas as members of the Electoral College, we clearly have standing, and whereas the Supreme Court did not rule on the merits of the arguments, and whereas the Supreme Court refused its responsibility to hear a case under Article 3, Section 2 of the United States Constitution, and whereas neither Texas nor any state should accept a clearly unconstitutional process that, if left unchallenged, will harm its citizens' lives, liberty, property, and will itself set a precedent for future usurpations. And whereas respect for our Constitution requires that all attempts to usurp it and its specifically designated powers by any means, governors or otherwise, should never be permitted, in this case relating to the appointment of electors, quote, in such a manner as the legislature thereof may direct, unquote, from the U.S. Constitution, Article 2, Section 1. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Presidential Electoral College from Texas call on the state legislatures of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Michigan to convene and appoint their electors in accordance with the true constitutional vote of the people, or if undeterminable, by appointing their electors directly. And be it further resolved that in the event of a failure of the 4 legislatures to act as the above, that the congressional delegations of those states object to those 4 states' unconstitutionally appointed electors when publicly read January 6th. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be sent to each member of the United States Supreme Court, President Donald J. Trump and Vice President Mike Pence, the Governor and Lieutenant Governor of Texas, and the Speaker of the legislative bodies of each respective state. Members, Mr. Chairman, I move adoption.
Elector Ramsey has moved adoption. Is there a second on the motion? Would you? One moment. One moment. We have to have a second first for objections.
CD 24, I second this motion.
Please state your name, congressional district, and your objection.
Mr. Chairman, Jim Pickle, Congressional District 3. I'm in favor of the resolution except for the words at the very beginning, "the moral cowardice of." With that stricken from that, I would vote for the approval. Thank you. And I move that those words be stricken from the resolution as amended.
Is there a motion to second the amendment to the resolution? Please state your name, congressional district, and your motion.
My name is Tamon Hamlet, Congressional District 18. I second the motion to the amendment to strike down the words and keep the rest of the proposal.
Is there any discussion on the motion to amend? Please state your name, congressional district, and your position on, for, or against.
Tex Hall, Congressional District 21, speaking for the amendment. I, Don Quixote, come and tilt at this windmill. Kind of catches your attention. If I'd have walked up and said, I, Don Quixote, y'all would have looked at me like my hat was on backwards. Ken Mercer would have probably done backflips and every other educator around, because while those words may have gotten your attention, they didn't get to the heart of the deal.
There's been an objection that the elector needs to maintain his speech on the motion, not on the resolution entirety. Please limit your remarks to the amendment to the resolution. Thank you.
That is correct, sir. So these two small words, moral cowardice, are like this fire ant bite I got the other day. It's little, but it's irritating, and everybody's had one. So when you throw those words out front, yes, you get their attention, but not in the right way. And I say that if anybody here can stand up now and tell Justices Thomas, Kavanaugh, and Coney Barrett that they lack moral courage, you better rethink things. So I stand with the amendment to delete the words moral cowardice from it, and you could even just substitute the word action. Thank you.
Is there any discussion on, for, or against the amendment to the motion?
Mr. Chairman, Matt Patrick, Congressional District 32. Speaking against the amendment, I'd like to leave the words in there. I wish I could give you a specific citation for this, but I didn't make note of it because it was something that I read this morning and I did not know we were going to be presenting this amendment yet. But there's a report available online that talks about it was written by someone who's a current staffer for one of the Supreme Court justices. And this, I'll just describe the report to you that I read, and you can make of it what you will. He said that the justices, as they always do, went into a closed room to discuss, cases they're taking or do debate. There's no phones, no computers, no nothing. No one else is in the room except for the 9 justices. It's typically very civil. They usually don't hear any sound as they just debate what they're doing. But when the Texas case was brought up, he said he heard screaming through the walls as Justice Roberts and the other liberal justices were insisting that this case not be taken up. And the reason, the words that were heard through the wall when Justice Thomas and Justice Alito were citing Bush versus Gore from John Roberts were, I don't give about that case. I don't want to hear about it. At that time, we didn't have riots. So what he was saying was that he was afraid of what would happen if they did the right thing. And I'm sorry, but that is moral cowardice. And we in the SREC, I'm an SREC member, We put those words in very specifically because the charge of the Supreme Court is to ultimately be our final arbitrator, our final line of defense for right and wrong. And they did not do their duty. So I think we should leave these words in because I want to send a strong message to them. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on the amendment to the motion?
Mr. Chairman, I raise a point of order against further consideration of the motion on the grounds that this body does not have authority to pass resolutions.
The elector's motion is respectfully overruled by the chair. Is there any other discussion on the amendment to the resolution? Oh, we have one elector coming down, it looks like.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Peyton Inge, CD 26. I think we've been looking across this. I'm going to speak against the amendment. We have been seeing around this country our representatives cower truly because of the violence of the other side, and it's time we call things what they really are. And it was cowardly what they did, and a moral irresponsibility, and we shouldn't be afraid to say that. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on the motion, on the amendment to the motion? Hearing none, Mr. Ramsey?
Take a vote.
Yeah. Recognize the amender of the motion to close. Mr. Pickle, it's your motion to amend, correct? Correct. Correct. Go ahead, close.
Jim Pickle, CD3. Been a constitutional appellate civil rights lawyer for 35 years. Been in front of the United States Supreme Court 9 times. Sending a message like this to a body of legislators or judicial officers is not going to get the attention that you want it to get. Nobody knows what happened in that conference room on purpose. The hearing, yelling, we're done triple hearsay, quadruple hearsay now about what was going on in that room. You cannot make your decision on that basis. You just can't do it. This body, if it passes a resolution, I'm not even sure it can, it needs to be the resolution of this body, not infected by what 5 other people maybe someday someplace said about what was happening at the Supreme Court. We either adopt the words moral cowardice, which are not legal terms, by the way, they're emotional terms, or we take those words out. The decision from the Supreme Court was very short, you can read it, it's 1 page, just said we reject it because we don't have standing. That's a legal concept. I think there's just a few people in this room that understand what standing is better than I do. It's a standing issue, it's a legal issue, it's not a moral issue. Plus, I think there were a lot of reasons why they did it the way they did it, which might actually be favorable to us. So I would not put inflammatory language in any kind of resolution leaving this room that's going out to a body of judicial or legislative officers across the state because it makes us look childish, impertinent, and angry. And that is not the signal that the great state of Texas should send. Thank you.
Pardon me, Mr. Pickle. Is there any other discussion on the motion to amend? Seeing none, we will now move to a vote. If all electors voting for Mr. Pickles' motion to amend, which the motion is to remove the words moral cowardice from the resolution, please raise your hand. And the Secretary staff, please keep them held while the Secretary staff tallies the vote. Would you please keep your hands up while you vote? You may all lower your hands now. The vote is 28 for the motion to amend. Oh, okay. Would all those voting against the motion to amend please raise your hand? You may lower your hands. It appears the vote is 29 for the resolution. And I was voting. 9 against, 1 absent. The motion passes. We counted you, I think it's 28. Mr. Ramsey, you're now recognized to make a motion.
It's kind of lonely up here. Yes, Mr. Chairman, members, this issue had come up in some discussions over the last 24 hours, and there was some language that had been proposed to take out that moral cowardice term. If we simply leave it the way we have just amended it, it simply doesn't read right if we just took out those words. The language that was proposed last night by the other side actually was that it would now read, Texas condemn the lack of action by the United States Supreme Court. So you'd basically be replacing the moral cowardice phrase with the lack of action by.
Are you making the motion?
Yes, so I move that we amend it in that form.
The motion on the table is to clarify the language to read, Texas condemns the lack of action by the United States Supreme Court. Is there a second on that motion? Yes, please.
It was to remove 4 words, the moral cowardice of. not just moral cowardice. Got to be a paraphrase.
Well, I would still make this.
No, I'm just saying,
Okay.
it does read grammatically okay if you take out those 4 words.
So the current reading of the resolution is Texas condemns the United States Supreme Court. Is that correct? Correct. And Mr. Ramsey is amending to repeat that again. Mr. Ramsey?
Yes, condemn the lack of action. And we do have copies of the language as proposed.
Is there a second on Mr. Ramsey's motion? Yes, Mr. Hall. State your point of order. Correct, but Mr. Ramsey's motion is to change the wording further. Is there a second on Mr. Ramsey's motion? Would you please state your name and congressional, are you planning a second?
Mr. Chairman, Matt Patrick, Congressional District 32. I second the motion to add the lack of action by, as recommended by Elector Ramsey.
The motion is seconded. Is there any discussion?
Jim Pickle, CD3. I'm a little bit of a grammar nerd. If you say Texas condemns the lack of action of the United States Supreme Court in failing to accept, that's redundant. In failing to accept is the lack of action by the court. So I don't think this latter amendment is necessary if we leave in the words in failing to accept. Again, it's just a grammatical point.
Is there any other discussion on Mr. Ramsey's motion to amend? You were the one that made it.
I know.
Are you withdrawing it?
Are you withdrawing it? Yeah, I can do that. With the permission of the body, that language was actually suggested to me by the other side, but I would gladly withdraw that language so we can get on to passing this.
The amendment's withdrawn. Is there any other discussion?
But he just withdrew. Well, he withdrew the motion. I'm saying we can show that to the original motion. The original motion is to pass the resolution as amended. As amended. Unless there's some further discussion.
Yes, please state your name.
Sean O'Brien, CD 15. I just wanted to clarify because the original wording, the word is condemn, and you said condemns several times when you were repeating the wording, and it's just condemn. So
Should be an S, I think, actually. Doesn't have to.
Do you have the reading of okay.
She can pass it on.
With the withdrawal of Mr. Ramsey's motion, we now fall back to the question on the amended version of the resolution from Mr. Pickle's resolution, which states, whereas the members of the Presidential Electoral College from Texas condemn the lack of action by the United States Supreme Court. Perfect. Singular, condemn. Correct. Thank you. The chair now recognizes Mr. Ramsey to close on his resolution. Is there any other discussion? Yes, Mr. Bruegel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. There's something to be said for doing the right thing.
Please state your name and congressional district.
David Brugel, Congressional District 19. In my view, there's something to be said for doing the right thing in the right venue. I find nothing in the United States Constitution or in state statute that authorizes us to take this action. So I'm going to encourage every member to vote no on this, not on the basis of the resolution itself, but acting under our proper constitutional authority. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on the amended resolution? Hearing none, the chair now recognizes Mr. Ramsey to close on his resolution.
Members, Madam Secretary, and Mr. Chairman, we have already honorably completed our statutory requirements, but we remain until adjournment a deliberative body. Deliberative bodies can go almost anywhere they want to go, provided there's not some prohibition against it. There is no prohibition against this badly needed resolution. America has been termed a shining light on a hill. When other countries have faced massive election fraud, the end result, more often than not, is a collapse of their rights, a collapse of their government, a collapse of their economies, and an inevitable slide toward tyranny. We can again be that shining light and show the world not to take this destructive pathway. About an hour or so ago, we took an oath, each and every one of us, to defend the Constitution. We have finished our statutory duties, but before we adjourn, this is one more thing we can and should do. Members, Madam Secretary, Mr. Chairman, I move adoption. Thank you.
The gentleman moves adoption. We'll now move to a vote. Those all in favor of the resolution as amended, please signify by raising your hand and allow for the Secretary of State staff to tally the vote. Show the chair voting aye. You may lower your hands. All those voting against, please raise your hand. You may lower your hands. The vote being 34 electors for, 4 against, the resolution passes. Is there any other business? Hearing none. Hold on one moment. Well, somebody absconded with my itinerary. Do you have the chart? Oh, there it is.